RuneScape Mobile bossing? This is going to be easy. Oh, wait a minute. I don't have my prayer on. Where's my prayer? There. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, my prayer's... Ah, for crying. How's it going, guys? So today I just wanted to go a bit more into depth on the combat in RuneScape Mobile and make a bit of a guide just so you guys can look over it and learn a few tips and tricks possibly towards the end of the video. We're going to first go over the basics, so the interface and the layout, where to find everything and all that sort of stuff. Then we're going to follow into slotting skills, things like that, and ways you can work around doing your bossings and things that will make it easier for you. I've already done an interface guide which included combat, so you can check that out on my channel as well. However, it didn't go into too much depth about it, so that's what we're going to do today, and hopefully this will be of some use for you guys. So just a couple of things that we should look over before we go into the actual guide is under settings and combat mode. It's a good idea to have your combat mode set at revolution. This way it'll let you automatically use your basic abilities, and you can separate your thresholds and your defensives away from your revolution bar. This way you can build your adrenaline without having to press hundreds of keys, but you've still got control over when you're going to do your abilities and when you're going to do your thresholds, all that sort of stuff. So that's a good thing to have. Also, just below that is the revolution size. Now mine's only set at 9. The reason I've kept it there is because that's what it's on my main game on PC as well. However, if you do only play mobile, it might be useful for you to move this up possibly and just put a few more basic abilities on there. This is something to look at and just work around yourselves. 9's perfectly fine, just so you put your abilities on there, your basic ones. However, if you're going to have, say, a switch, so you wanted to go from dual wield to two-hand, you could possibly put your dual wield abilities and your two-handed abilities on the same revolution bar, and that way once you switch weapon, it'll automatically use those different abilities that can't be used with the other weapons. Now, just below the revolution size bar is another 3 options to automatically trigger basic abilities, threshold abilities, or ultimate abilities. I would recommend having ultimate abilities unticked off this. However, you're probably not going to have them on your revolution bar anyway, but just in case you do, all it's going to do is stop it from draining all your adrenaline whenever you're not ready to. So it's a good idea to have your ultimates at a control for yourself. Now you might want your threshold abilities off the bar as well. I sometimes have them on there just because if it triggers them automatically, that's fine, it doesn't matter anyway if they're ready, then I'm not going to worry about it too much. However, if you've got loads of abilities before them on the bar anyway, there's a good chance that it's not going to bother triggering them anyway because it won't get to it through the cooldowns. So just for those of you that haven't seen my other interface guide, just to quickly revisit the combat position of everything. The gauntlet in the bottom left brings up your combat window with your action bars here. Now with revolution activated in the settings menu, you're going to have the revolution bar in the bottom there underneath your health icon and stuff like that, and above that you've got your activatable buttons, which is your manual action bar. Now as you can see there, I have my basic abilities on the bottom with 3 thresholds, and then I've got my defensives and things like that, prayers and stuff and food, in my action buttons. To swap any of these around, if we just press the settings wheel underneath the gauntlet that's appeared now, and it opens up the powers window here. Now as you can see, you've got all the tabs for all the styles of combat, including your defensive and your prayers. So if you went across to the defensive one and then selected the one that you wanted, you could then drag across, say anticipate you wanted to put that somewhere else rather than where it is. We'll swap that there and put freedom over there. You just drag them straight across and place them in. You can't, however, drag them around the action bar themselves. You do need to drag them from the abilities box on the right hand side. So that's a little bit awkward. Just in case you put something in the wrong place, you're then going to have to reorganize it all. So just do take your time and plan it out carefully. Now if you look down at the bottom, you can see it says revolution action bar, and you can get the whole drop down menu to see which action bar you're looking at. The best way that I find to do this is, see at the top where it says action buttons, so change that to the action bar that you want it to be on, and then it will match the revolution action bar at the bottom. This just brings it up to a bigger sort of option size for you to place things in, so you can organise that a little bit easier than trying to drag it into the little bits at the bottom. And so now that we know where all the abilities are and how to place them all, we'll come out of this and we'll just move on to a couple more things that I wanted to go over with the interface. Obviously it's not too customizable, but there's just a couple of things I wanted to go through. Now, on the right hand side, with the ribbon, which is all these buttons here, as you can see me clicking through them, you can customize this to suit yourselves a bit better. So if you are going to be doing combat, you don't necessarily need things like your quests and your pathing and stuff, which is already on there by default. So if you go to the home button up the top here and go to ribbon setup, that'll bring up the setup window. Now you can change these to things like, as you can see, I've got my defensive tab here and my prayer tab next to that with my magic spells as well. It's useful to also have the summoning familiar on there. The reason being is if you're in the middle of a fight and you desperately need a defensive that's not necessarily on this bar here. So say I've got devotion and resonate and stuff like that on there, but what if I needed to use debilitate? I'd go into defensives here and it's just there for me. So I can quickly click that and then I can swap back out. Also, having the familiar icon on this ribbon bar is very useful. If I had one summon now, for example a pack yak, you'd see that the familiar's inventory would be displayed here. And this just lets you access the food or items that it's holding. Say if you needed to take out a rocktail, rather than just pressing take from Beast of Burden and it giving you loads of Saradam and Brews, you're going to be able to take specifically that rocktail out of there. So it's just a bit convenient for you to be able to just access that and take out what you need. So I just recommend, guys, that you take advantage of this ribbon setup that they give you and just customize that as you play on mobile throughout whatever you're doing. It's not just necessarily to combat, just change it and put the tabs on there that you're going to need for whatever you're doing at that time in game. So if you are bossing, put your defensive tabs on there, put your prayer tabs on there, things that you can switch through. Just don't have anything on there that's not really useful because you've only got limited options. So it's a good idea for you to set everything up to suit you for what you're doing at that time. It's not too much customization for you to go through and change when you need to change it. So I've shown you where to find your abilities. I've shown you how to organize the ribbon setup, and we went over a couple of things in the settings that will help you out. Now, the next thing that I want to go over is how to bring things onto the manual action bar that's not accessible from this option in here. Now, if you wanted to put food on here, for example, all you need to do is go to your inventory and say you had a piece of food there, but we'll use a weapon just for example, and drag that item out of the inventory and put that straight onto the bar where you want it to go. So I've just replaced my Berserk with a Drygar offhand. So that's nice and easy to do, and it's the same with anything like prayers and stuff like that. If you wanted to do it from here, rather than going into that option, you can just drag them straight off and put them in. So now that we've gone through the setup, I thought I'd go over and do some combat and just show you how it all sort of plays out. You can see that Revolution's taking care of all my basic abilities and building up my adrenaline for me. And now you can, if you look at my action bar, my manual one, you can see that I've got access to all of these now by myself. So this just gives you a wider range of abilities, and I do recommend that you do it this way. So as you can see, he'll just constantly use his basic abilities, and I've got access to use Devotion here, and then Anticipate, and then all my thresholds here are all available as well. Now, so this just gives you a better control of your character, having all your defensives and thresholds set to manually activate, and having your basics down at the bottom on Revolution, so you can kind of forget about them and just let your character build his adrenaline by himself. There's enough for you to already pay attention to, and in the next section there's going to be even more once I explain the certain things you can do during a boss fight, for example, next, as you're going to need a lot of different abilities rather than what we can get here. I'm sure a lot of you veteran players are probably looking at this and going, that's not enough control. How am I going to use things like Barricade, and how am I going to escape away from Nex when she does the Blood Siphon, and how am I going to Freedom, put a shield on and use Resonate when I'm in the Ice Prison? How am I going to do all that sort of things? Now, that's where action bar swapping comes into play. So I'll go over that now and just explain a little bit of how that works. And this is where you get into the sort of more confusing bit of the RuneScape Mobile combat. It's definitely doable. I've got an X kill and recorded, so I'll put that up for you as well, and you can have a look at that and just see how I go through doing all that. So what I mean by action bar swapping is, if you look just underneath the left hand side of my manual action bar, you'll see a number 5. and then if you look on the right hand side of my revolution bar, you'll see a number 1. Now you're probably not going to be bothered about changing the revolution bar, as that'll change with your weapons automatically as we looked at earlier. But what you can do is, if I select number 5 here, and then it brings up the 6 action bars that you've got available, swap that to number 4 as I've already set it up, and it will bring up another set of abilities for you to use. Now, as you can see here, I've got Escape and Surge, Bladed Dive, and I've got a couple of other things, sort of like more Thresholds, my Drygores, and my Ring of Vigor. Now, you'd customize this depending on what you were doing. So if you were on Nex and you wanted to use Onslaught during the Blood phase, you'd probably have Onslaught swapped where something else is, Bladed Dive maybe. And you'd have your Drygores probably not even slotted here at all. So, like I say, you'd customize this to be whatever you were doing at the time. So, if you've got Revolution, just taking care of your basic abilities, you've got action bar number 5 in my case, with prayers, food, defensives, and a couple of thresholds, and then you can swap to action bar number 4, and you've got access to more thresholds, weapon swap, surge, escape, and a few other things. Obviously, you can customize this to whatever you need. Then that's giving you an extra 14 abilities on your screen that you can swap to. It's not too difficult to just click the number 4 and click number 5 and swap back round to it like that, and then quickly swap back if you need to. But a lot of this time it's going to be situational anyway. So for example, if I was going into Nex, I would probably have my action bar 4 set up for the Blood phase, so that I've got Onslaught on there, and I've got Escape or Surge, and anything else that I might need for that phase. And that way, as soon as I get to the end of the Shadow phase, I would swap to number 4, tag Nex to get into the Blood phase, and then I'm ready to go on there. And then I can swap back to number 5 for the next phase, for example. What I would recommend doing, however, is keeping the same sort of layout for your food and things like that on both of all the action bars. So if you're swapping from 5 and 4, you'll notice that my food and prayer and restore and stuff is all in the same sort of slots. So if I swap over, my food doesn't move and I know where they're going to be. And I've got Berserk on both of them, just because if I wanted to Berserk quickly on this one, I don't need to swap. However, if I go back to number 4, I've got my Ring of Vigor and my Berserk next to each other, so I can quickly click on my Ring of Vigor and Berserk, and then all I'll have to do is go into my inventory and put my other ring back on. So really, it's just setting everything up and looking at ways that it's going to benefit yourselves before you throw yourself into that big fight. So I'll just give a quick scenario of something that you might need to use action bar swapping for. As I said before, you could set it up in a way that's perfect for Nex's Blood phase, so we'll use that example for this. Now, in Nex's Blood phase, she does a blood sacrifice, which turns your character red, and you have to either surge away or escape away to be far enough away from her so that she doesn't heal herself up too much. Now, in solo, it's very important that you do get away from this, otherwise you're going to probably struggle to take down the Blood phase. So let's just show you an example of how that will play out. So let's just say we've just tagged her into Blood phase. We want to do a bit of damage to her before she does this blood sacrifice, so we're going to use our thresholds here. Use Assault as well. And then we know that it's coming, so we swap over to number 4 where we've got our escape. And we just wait. When she turns us red, we're going to press escape, put our Drygores on, use Blade of Dive to get back on Nex, and all we need to do now is put our Scythe back on, and then we're good to use more thresholds to do a bit more damage before she does her Siphon. So that's just one quick example of how you could use action bar swapping to give yourself access to more abilities. Now, if you get loads of practice in, there's no real limit to how many abilities you're going to need. You can just quickly swap through. If you remember that number 3 is set up for this, number 2 is set up for this, and number 5 is set up for this, you can just switch through them. It's a lot of micromanagement, but with practice, it's definitely doable. I just wanted to give you guys one last tip before we move on to the next section. Now, if you look at my revolution bar at the bottom, you can see that I've made it bigger. It's now 14 slots rather than the 9 that I'm usually got it set to. The reason I've done this is, if you look closely at it, you'll see that I've put the dual wield basic abilities on there, as well as the two-handed basic abilities. Now, as you know, obviously, some abilities are only available for each weapon style, so if I change to Drygores, you'll see that the ones that have lit up have changed, and Cleave's not available anymore, and things like that. The way this will help you is, say you wanted to, during a boss fight, change from a two-handed weapon to dual-wielded weapons. as soon as you do that, if you didn't have all the basic abilities available, you're going to lose some abilities. So this will stop you from building adrenaline as quick, because your character is going to be stood around waiting for cooldowns to come off. So having them all on there ready to go will just mean that once you change weapon over, see if you watch me just change this scythe, you'll see that now cleave at the end is now available and other things have gone unavailable. So it just means that your character's not going to use less abilities and has access to the other ones to keep building adrenaline. One last little neat trick I wanted to show you guys before we move on actually, sorry, is you can see that I've put resonate on the very first slot on my action bar. Now what this will do is, if I put my main hand Drago weapon on as well as my shield, it's going to automatically use it as soon as it's on. There you go, you can see he's used it. Now this just saves me from having to do one more action as well as putting it on and activating on my bar, my manual action bar, and it will also free up that slot for you. So a couple more things that I wanted to include in this video, guys, was just giving you an idea of how you can set up things like an AFK action bar and a non-AFK action bar, just so that you can sort of look at, if you wanted to AFK Dark Beasts like I tend to do quite a lot, or Abyssal Demons, things like that, and just how you can find the best way to get most damage but without paying as much attention. So let's just have a look at the AFK one first, and I'll give you a couple of suggestions on how you can get that set up. So let's just bring up my action bar and take a look at my abilities a bit bigger and clearer. As you can see, my threshold abilities are at the front of my revolution bar, so these will be prioritised before all my basics if the adrenaline's available. However, if the adrenaline is not available, then it will just use the basics to build up more. So for example, if I was soloing Kriara, I would want to have as much damage as I can, so my thresholds are going to want to be at the front, so they're triggered every chance that they get, and this will ensure that I'm doing as much damage without me paying as much attention. So if you wanted Death Swiftness, for example, to be used as soon as it was available, every chance it was ready, if you popped it right at the front, every time you got 100% adrenaline and Death Swiftness was off cooldown, your evolution bar would use that, and then it would look at everything after that for availability and use them in that order, so it would build up adrenaline again, and then it would use your thresholds for you. As for a more manual action bar setup, I've kind of covered this in the previous part of the video, so I won't go over it too much. We'll just have a quick recap. You're going to want your basic abilities on the revolution bar at the bottom, and then on your action bar that you're going to be interacting with yourself, you're going to want things like your defensives and any actives that you're going to want to use, like ultimates, berserk, any prayers, food, and just any thresholds. And also, obviously, if you want to go to a second bar, you can have any other wide range of abilities there for you. Now, I know there's a lot to take in from this video, and just so you can get used to everything from the combat in RuneScape Mobile, but it's definitely doable, and it's all just down to practice. So that's my next step for you guys. Just get out there and put it into practice. Take yourself to a boss, do a slayer task, anything that you'd like to do, and I hope that I've made it quite clear that the combat in RuneScape Mobile isn't actually that bad. There is possible to do your bosses, and it is possible to go and do any sort of slayer task or even PvP if you practice enough. Don't go into the wilderness now on mobile though, guys, please, and lose all your stuff and then come back and say, oh no, he said I'd be able to do PvP, but I've lost all my stuff. Practice first, then go and do some PvP. Who knows, maybe you're going to be a god at it. Give it a go. So anyway, guys, that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can take something away from it to sort of put into practice and learn a bit better about the combat yourselves. Please get out there and give bossing a try. RuneScape Mobile isn't as bad as people seem to think it is for combat. It's actually pretty damn good, to be honest. So, like I say, I hope it helped, and thanks for watching. Bye.